Lewis, you know about Sweden. You've been to Sweden, and you know, of course, that Sweden is an evil, socialist, communist country that is completely anti-business.
Yes, that's true, David. And there are just people dying everywhere because of horrible socialist, communist, Nazi healthcare.
Well, there's a really, really interesting article in Slate by Matthew Iglesias, which points out that in per capita terms, there are actually more billionaires in evil, socialist, communist Sweden than here in the United States. So some of the countries that have more per capita billionaires than the US are kind of unique cases. So, for example, Monaco has 3 billionaires with a population of only 35,000. There's very specific reasons. Monaco is a place that very rich people like to live or have residency, right? So we can't really say that a micronation like Monaco tells us much about social and economic policy relative to the US. However, Sweden is a different story. Sweden has 14 billionaires with a population of about 10 million, and it is number 12 in terms of billionaires. And this is very interesting because there are, number one, so many incorrect ideas about what Sweden is and what it represents among the American right, but also because Sweden has made some changes that make it not the evil, socialist, communist country that so many among the American right believe it to be. So when we look at, it doesn't even, I could read you the list of some of Sweden's billionaires. It doesn't matter. You can look it up. The really important thing here is we often talk about how there's a specific environment that leads to riches. And among the American economic right, it seems to be low government spending, low taxes, self-made business owners, not much in terms of social programs, which tend to hurt the economy and restrict growth, etc. The good news is that Sweden has high taxes, and it still goes to finance cheap healthcare, education. There's an excellent public transportation system. There's generous subsidies to low-income households. There are so many of the things that in the US, we are told by some, Lewis, would destroy the economy and destroy the possibility of riches. And it seems to be having absolutely no negative effect whatsoever.
Yeah, you've got a completely different school of thought. I mean, in the United States, it seems like the path is clear for those who already have an advantage to make insane amounts of money. In Sweden, maybe you could look at it the other way and say, look, we've leveled the playing field. Everyone here gets a great education, and in that way, everyone has a chance to make that much money.
Right. So that's exactly the point, which is in the US, there is very little class mobility. If you are born very poor, it is statistically incredibly unlikely that you will ever be anything but a little bit less poor. Now, you can talk about specific examples of athletes or entertainers, but those are statistically insignificant. And when you look at, hold on a second, if everyone had a much stronger base, wouldn't they, based on class mobility, have a much better shot of one day being very rich? That's an interesting point. Now, there are some changes that have been made in Sweden which are more reminiscent of American neoconservative thinking, including changing the tax code to a flat tax on investment income. This allows wealth to accumulate much faster for rich people. No taxes on inheritance. Corporate tax rate is lower than in the US. Now, that one may be deceiving because the US tax rate, corporate tax rate, is higher. But because of all of the deductions and loopholes, the effective tax rate for American businesses, as we've talked about, Lewis, is sometimes zero and is often much lower than in Sweden. And there is more or less light economic regulation. So what have we learned from Sweden? We have learned Sweden is not communist or socialist, number one. Sweden provides more benefits and has higher taxes than the US, and it still has more billionaires per capita. And for those who are saying, hey, billionaires aren't really the sign of a good economy, I agree. But some of the arguments that are made in the US are that the European system is so socialist that it doesn't allow for this type of capital accumulation. And clearly, Lewis, it does.
Yeah, the numbers speak for themselves. We have to accept that.